So I'm about 5 years too late on this, but I thought I would share some thoughts about The Last Jedi and why I think it's actually a pretty good movie. And more than good, it's smart. Um, and I know that might sound a little pretentious, but you know, so what? um, so I'll do a numbered list since this is YouTube after all. Um, and I want to go through all the themes that I really enjoy in the movie. And so, theme number one is listening to women is a big theme in this movie. Um, I won't want to speculate as to why people vehemently dislike this movie too much, but I do know a lot of the internet bro community, I think, hated this feature of the movie, but I think it's one of the most interesting because you just definitely don't see it a lot in movies. Um, you see this come up in the three major storylines in the movie, actually, are all about men learning to take advice from and counsel from women. First with Poe and Holdo and Leia, where he also learns an important lesson about um, individualism versus collective effort, which is something to put a pin in later. It comes up again. Um, Finn needs to learn to listen to Rose, and because through that he learns about selfishness versus collective effort, which is also another thing to put a pin in for later. And then, of course, Luke learns to listen to Rey when it comes to basically abandoning his hermit lifestyle, helping out the resistance, and leaving the island. Um, and there's a bigger theme going on there as well. But all three of these themes, all three of these examples play out during for the bigger theme of men learning to listen to women and not just doing what is stereotypical. So um, Poe is very much, like they call him a flyboy. He is, your stereotypical cocky, know-it-all, fly by the seat of your pants, solve every problem with it by himself type of guy. And what he needs to learn, what his character arc trajectory is not just to listen to his superiors, although that's a big thing. He needs to listen to women in power who are ranked higher than him, older than him, and wiser than him. But the specific lesson they teach him is that, and this is a lesson that comes up over and over in the movie actually, is that war and by extension the rebellion is a collective effort. It cannot be won by a single person doing a single grand gesture. And by the end, Poe is more intelligent with the way he commands his forces. He orders them to retreat twice. First on the attack on the cannon, and then later when Luke is out there, he again says, he's buying us time. We need to get out of here. We're not going to go out there and attack and help him. So he learns several things. He learns that sometimes retreat is better than full-on attack. He learns that that the war has to be won together as a group effort rather than just him doing it all by himself. Finn also needs to learn this kind of lesson about selfishness and collective effort versus individual effort. His arc is that he is selfish. He does care about Rey, but he's only focused on Rey and himself. He doesn't understand that he has a larger role to play in something bigger than himself. That's why he needs to listen to Rose. Rose is the one that makes him see what is happening. Not just, she guides him through Canto Bight, and she's the one that shows him the corruption and the ugly underbelly of what's going on there. And through that, his arc is that he becomes a member of the resistance. His arc kind of culminates in him calling himself rebel scum. He learns that it's not enough just to look out for himself and his one friend, but that he needs to be part of the greater whole. And so once again, you have this theme of like the individual versus the collective. People learning that the rebellion is a group effort and they have a role to play within that group. And Finn can only learn that lesson with Rose, because Rose knows about the cost of war. She knows about, she is a dedicated member of the Resistance in a way that he is not until later. Now Luke probably has the most interesting arc of the entire story, because the themes of his arc are prevalent as well with Kylo Ren. His big problem and what he needs Rey for is that he is checked out of the world. He has made mistakes, and the way he is atoning for those mistakes is by just deciding that he's going to do nothing at all ever again. He's like, I screwed up, and because of that, the Jedi need to die, and I'll be the last Jedi, and there won't be any more because I'm not going to train them. The problem with that, and this is a problem in a lot of spaces when we talk about justice, is that it's not enough just to do nothing. Luke needs to fix the mistakes he has actually made, and that requires an active effort. And that is what Rey is there to teach him, that he has a role to play, that he has things he can do to help. Whereas he doesn't want to do anything. He believes that since he failed Ben, that everybody should just stop trying to do anything with regards to the Force, that there shouldn't be Jedi anymore, and that he especially shouldn't do anything. But that is wrong, basically. It's to use an analogy, it's like, it's not enough to just not be racist. You have to actively work in anti-racism. It's not enough just to say, well, I'm just going to do nothing at all, ever. That doesn't help the cause. Like, yes, that means you are not ever responsible for anything bad, but you're not proactively helping either. And that is Luke's major problem. And we'll put a pin in that later, because there's another theme where that is fleshed out more. But that's where Rey's arc is Luke's arc, is taking him from failure and self-loathing and just doing nothing to where he is at the end, where he realizes he can do something to help, and he does, and he goes out there to face Ben. He's facing his failures literally and figuratively, and helping out the Resistance. So that was a lot, but that was point one. Point two, what I really like about this movie is it democratizes the Force. It fixes what I think is probably one of the biggest mistakes the prequels made, even though I love the prequels, and one day I'll probably make a video defending them, but the midichlorians was not a good idea. It just wasn't. Making the Force something that is a genetically inherited thing kind of ruins the entire philosophy and mysticism and point of the Force as what it really is, in terms of something that it can be tapped into, that you can meditate on, that you can cultivate. It shouldn't be genetic, and this kind of undoes that. In this movie, the Force is something that does not belong to anyone, but that means it's open to everyone. Anybody can tap into the Force. Rey doesn't have midichlorians. She doesn't come from a family or a bloodline that knows how to use the Force. She is just able to tap into it because because she can, and she can be trained to do it better. And that is important for democratizing the Force. It comes to a head at the end of the movie, where you see the little kid being able to use the Force to move the broom. So it says that the Force is something that goes beyond the Jedi and even the Sith. It exists regardless of their battles, which is another reason why it's important that the Jedi Temple gets destroyed. Is some things in the past do need to be let go. And this idea that the Force is something that belongs exclusively to the Jedi, and then there's just the Sith corrupting it and the Jedi have all the access, that is done away with as a concept. And I think that's really neat. I think that's really cool. It's one of my favorite things about this movie. The third thing, which is probably, I think, um, the biggest and most important theme, is what to do with the past, and mainly letting go of the past, destroying the past, and forgetting the past, and also reconciling failures. So this plays out in a number of ways. One is Kylo Ren kind of represents the wrong, Kylo and Luke both, they represent the wrong way to think about the past. Kylo wants to destroy everything that came before him and start completely anew. But that's because he's afraid of himself, his past, and his attachments. And he can't reconcile his inner turmoil, so he wants to just completely destroy it. He wants Rey to do the same thing. You know, Rey is conflicted because, you know, she can't handle the fact that her parents were nobodies, that they're dead, and that nobody is coming to save her. But this is like a trauma that needs to be worked through. And Kylo just says, forget it, bury it, destroy it. But he has, you know, he's committed his sins. He needs to reconcile with himself, you know, what he did to his father, what he did to Luke and his disciples, and what he's been doing all throughout his life. But he doesn't want to do that. So his view of the past is just that it should just be destroyed and ignored. And that, you know, comes up in the throne room. And I think that's really interesting, where like he can't have a proper arc yet. He can't mature because he can't deal with his own past yet. This is not, his arc isn't completed in this movie, and unfortunately there was Rise of Skywalker, but this was the setting up the midpoint of his arc, which would require him to actually work through and reconcile the past with the present and the future. Luke can't reconcile his past either, and the way he chooses to reconcile it is he runs away from it rather than face it. That's like I said earlier, the way to fix a mistake is to, and this is kind of like, there's a model for how to do a proper apology. There's you have to acknowledge that you made a mistake. You have to apologize for it. Then you also have to actively undo whatever it was that caused the mistake in the first place. Luke's solution is just to do nothing ever again. He just says he wants to run away from it, and just never do anything that might get him in trouble ever again. But that's not the right way to do it. His redemption arc is that he faces those mistakes, he acknowledges them, and then he actively does the work to undo them, which means that's why he has to face Kylo Ren, and that's why he has to help the Resistance. So this is a really interesting theme of, like, you know, what do we do with our past, especially when we don't like our past? And the answer this movie gives us is that it has to be faced and acknowledged and worked through, that it cannot just be ignored or destroyed or put aside. And I think that's a really, really interesting theme that goes on throughout the movie. Number 4, if we're doing a numbered list again, we've already talked about this, a little bit, but like the end of the Jedi as a concept goes along with democratizing the Force. The Jedi as a concept has to end. That's why the temple is destroyed, and at the same time as the juxtaposition for the Jedi temple being destroyed is the throne room fight where Snoke is killed, and Kylo Ren says, you know, basically, forget the Jedi, forget the Sith, it's just me and you. And Luke as well realizes that it's not about the ancient texts, It's not about upholding the Jedi Order, because one thing he is right about is the Jedis are failures, that's their legacy. And this goes back once again to the prequels, which we can talk about later. But the legacy that the Jedi have at this point is that they've kind of failed to stop the dark side, that they were supposed to be the universe's protectors, and they let Darth Vader rise to power. And so that monopolizing and constricting of the Force needs to end. And that's why the temple needs to burn. That's why the throne room burns down as well. Is that the Force needs to become, again, a thing that is its own thing that belongs to everyone and no one. And I think that's a really interesting theme. Like that's what it means by The Last Jedi. It's not just that Luke is refusing to teach anybody else. It's that the concept of Jedi is now over. There will be Force users in the future, but it won't be Jedi and Sith anymore. Number 5 is, I really like the critique of capitalism in this movie. I think the entire Canto Bight sequence, I didn't appreciate it when I first saw the movie. I thought it was kind of a weird detour from the rest of the plot. And it kind of is thematic, like theatrically speaking, like watching the movie, just as a watching experience, it does kind of feel like it is kind of its own thing aside from everything else. But it's important because it criticizes war profiteering, it criticizes the 1%, it criticizes the cruelty necessary to produce wealth. That is kind of the whole point of the Canto Bight sequence. Rose literally says to Finn, look closer. And that's when, he literally has to look closer to see that, when he sees the races, that it is cruelty and violence that allows those races to happen. But the whole sequence is them looking closer, is seeing where the wealth in this galaxy comes from, and it comes from war profiteering. That all this lavish extravagance comes from misery and death. And that's really interesting. It's really cool to have a movie that actually takes on themes of of capitalism and wealth and what it takes to produce that kind of wealth. Number 6, I think, is really cool that Rey and Snoke don't have origins. Once again, Rise of Skywalker ruined this, but pretending that movie didn't exist and we just saw this one, I think it's really cool that Snoke doesn't have an origin and he doesn't really matter. Like I said, I could say this with hindsight, but I think it would have been a mistake to make him part of a longer line of other Jedi families stretching back, to Palpatine or some other previously known Sith. It's kind of really cool that he doesn't have a backstory. He just is Snoke, and he is menacing in his own way, but it's just really subverts expectations to have him just die, and he doesn't actually come from anywhere. We don't learn anything about him. That's really cool. I think it's even cooler when we find out that Rey is she's not Obi-Wan's granddaughter. She's not a Palpatine. She's not a Skywalker. She's a nobody. And that goes back to our previous theme of democratizing the Force, that the Force is not just strong with people who come from the right bloodline, that you could be Force sensitive and Force powerful regardless of your upbringing. And it's a really amazing sequence when Kylo Ren says, you have no place in this story, you come from nothing, you are nothing, but not to me. But he, he's also wrong. She does have a place in the story. She isn't just nothing. She is powerful, and she doesn't need baggage to be powerful. She doesn't need a history to be powerful. She can just be a nobody whose parents were nothing. And I think that's really neat. Winding down the list, I would say number 7 This isn't really a big, important theme, but I think the hold on maneuver is awesome. I know it creates a lot of weird plot holes and people asking questions about like why they didn't do that before or since, but I just think it's a really cool scene. It's gorgeous, and it's I think there's an emotional swell to it. With I'm a sucker for self-sacrifice. I think a lot of people are. But yeah, it's a great looking sequence. And that leads me to number 8, which is this movie in general has great cinematography. It's a great looking movie. The set pieces are really well done. From the throne room fight to the salt planet to the hold on maneuver to Canto Bight. It's just a really good looking, well shot film. And yeah, that's why I think it's actually a good film. It's, mixed reviews, I think, came from the public. I think the critics were a little kinder to it, but I think in the end, this movie is smart. It's very intelligent. It has a lot of intelligent things to say and a lot of interesting themes, and it subverts a lot of expectations for those themes in a way that you almost never see with big blockbusters. I'm not saying it's the smartest movie ever made, but you rarely see a billion-dollar movie made by a trillion-dollar franchise that takes common tropes and subverts them so strongly and presents themes like, feminist themes, war themes, capitalism themes, all this stuff going on in such a huge blockbuster is kind of unheard of. And I really appreciate Rian Johnson for taking a lot of risks with this movie. I will say it's not perfect. Like, this is me defending the movie. I think as a cinematic experience, just sitting down and watching it, it's pretty good. It's not great. I still think the Rose maneuver is really stupid. Her crashing into Finn, and when she says, we're not going to win by destroying what we hate, we're going to win by saving what we love, that's cringe. It's a cringy line, and it also it doesn't belong there. Finn's arc is complete with his self-sacrifice, because where he started was a place from selfishness and a place from just seeing that he only cares about himself and Rey. The fact that he is willing to die for the rebel cause is the completion of his arc. Now, I guess you got to write something, because you can't kill off your main character. He's supposed to live, but her nearly killing them both to stop him, and her saying that line is not great. It's something I don't like in the movie. I think the movie's a little too long. Like, it's 2.5 hours. I mean, that's pretty long for a blockbuster. And it starts to drag a little in that last half hour. I also think this movie lacks action. Like, the part of me that watches Star Wars, I watch it for big laser sword fights. And there's not a lot of great action in this movie. The throne room is the one kind of big sword fight in the movie, and it's not great. There's lots of videos out there talking about why that scene sucks. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but it's not Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. It's not Obi-Wan versus Anakin. There's nothing that amazing compared to those prequel fight scenes in this one. So overall, as a movie, I give it like a 7 out of 10. But as a script, as the ideas and themes it explores, that's where the movie really shines. And that's why I wanted to make this video about why this movie is actually good. And looking back at it, it's not just good by comparison to Rise of Skywalker, but that definitely, I think, vindicates Rian Johnson and his vision, and that he should have been given the reins to finish out the trilogy. But yeah, I think it's a really intelligent film that doesn't get enough credit for exploring all these themes. And there's probably more to say, but that's pretty much all I have on it. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you disagree, if you agree, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe. Thanks.